Hey everyone, and welcome to Aude and Tulava, where we are walking our way through the Lord of the Rings a chapter at a time, at least so far. Today we're talking about Chapter 4, A Shortcut to Mushrooms. We left our heroes asleep with the elves in the forest in the Shire. Let's go through the events of the chapter and we'll, talk about a few themes we see along the way. The hobbits wake up from their epic party with the elves from the night before. Luckily, of course, the elves left them food and drink to take with them. And while Frodo does some serious thinking during breakfast, much to Pippin's dismay, we are reassured of Sam's devotion to helping and working and going with Frodo. As Sam recounts his conversation with the elves, Frodo is surprised to hear something so non-parochial. A change is already overtaking Sam after spending simply one night among the elves. As the hobbits begin their day's journey, they, meaning Frodo, decide to go off cross-country and keep off the road. As they struggle through thickets, undergrowth, briars, and more, Sam looks back and sees a black figure silhouetted against the sky with his horse. So while not a eucatastrophe by any means, they definitely got lucky Frodo made that decision. And as many people like to say, they kept walking and walking. They adjusted their bearing and kept walking until it was time for lunch and, of course, some singing. But when they started their second round of singing, they heard it. A long-drawn wail came down the wind like the cry of some evil and lonely creature. It rose and fell and ended on a high piercing note. Even as they sat and stood, as if suddenly frozen, it was answered by another cry, fainter and further off, but no less chilling to the blood. Now, as we all know, by now, this is the first time we're hearing the Black Rider's voice. And as creepy as it is, the hobbits make the right call and get to walking again. But worse than the Black Riders is where they end up in their cross-country tramp. Farmer Maggot's farm. Frodo's just terrified of him because he used to steal mushrooms from him and Maggot chased him off with his dogs. Still, kind of scary. As they meet up with Farmer Maggot, it turns out he had a bit of a run-in like the gaffers from before. Black Rider came along and asked about Baggins. Rather than dither around outside, Maggot invites the hobbits in. Sam, being quite the homebody, is pretty suspicious, and not least because Farmer Maggot treated Frodo so poorly, but begins to be won over by what else? Beer. Ever the gentle hobbit Farmer Maggot is, he invites them to stay for dinner so he can drive them to the ferry afterwards in his cart. They get a lift for the 5 miles or so to the ferry, and luckily, again, it's a foggy night. It will allow them some privacy and to hear anyone before they see them. Of course, they do hear someone first, but their heart attacks are all for naught, as it's just Merry Brandybuck. Merry collects his friends, sends Mr. Maggot back to his wife and family, and before they get on the ferry, the chapter ends. As some people would say, nothing much happens in this chapter except walking. But there are quite a few things that we can learn and things that, if we keep in the back of our mind, it will serve us well reading forward. The first thing I want to talk about is hooves. I know it's not the fanciest of topics, but hear me out. When the hobbits meet Merry by the ferry, Tolkien describes it like this. Clip, clop, came the approaching rider. The fall of the hooves sounded loud in the still foggy air, and a paragraph later, clop, 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 clop. The rider was nearly on them. Now, I don't know about you, but clip, clop, and clop, clop don't sound particularly sinister to me. And this is something that Tolkien was really, really good at. He used the sounds of certain words to get his point across. Here we have a little hobbit pony clip-clopping along the road. A few chapters later, we have Glorfindel's horse galloping along clippity-clippity. Even the word Moria, which means black pit, makes me feel, the black pit. And the word we'll hear more about later, Morgul, means black sorcery. And it feels like what it means. And I think we can see this really well in letter 297, where Tolkien talks about his language. He says, talking about a Scandinavian tale, the tale had no interest for me. I had already forgotten it. I've never since looked at it. It was thus merely the source of a sound sequence, Moria, which might have been found or composed elsewhere. I liked the sound sequence. It alliterated with mines, and it connected itself with the more element in my linguistic construction. And in other letters, he talks about other sound sources. He worked quite a bit by sound. This is one of those things to keep in the back of your head as we progress through the book. Keep an eye out for words and phrases that give away their meaning just by their sound. Next, I want to go back to Sam's parochialism. While the three hobbits are having dinner with the Maggots, we get this line. He had a natural mistrust of the inhabitants of other parts of the Shire. Pretty clear when you think about it. It takes us right back to chapter 1, where the gaffer is talking about Frodo's parents and how it's a small wonder trouble came of intermingling with people from across the Brandywine. So yes, Sam may just be following in his father's footsteps and is, just kind of ignorant of other people. And it's easy in this day and age to judge him pretty hard for that. But we have to think about the fact that while it's never stated in the books as it is in the movies, Sam is the furthest away from home he's ever been. The only people he met that weren't, from Hobbiton, let alone the Shire, were some travelers or maybe the occasional guest Bilbo had over, if he let Sam hang around long enough. But it's also a theme Tolkien really seems to work out throughout the whole book. I heard Corey Olsen mention that Boromir was actually really parochial, and I couldn't believe it. He's parochial. How? He's a prince, prince of this wonderful Gondor, essentially. But when you hear him speak, it's only about Gondor. Only Gondor and his experience there and how they think about things in Gondor or their beliefs in Gondor. And he always states those things as facts. Kind of parochial. But I just love seeing this Sam, pure little innocent Sam, just not liking this one little farmer because he was protecting his way of life 30 years ago from thieves. Next, we have Frodo. Man, he's already going through a bit of a character journey. Right? As the hobbits wake up and after their evening with the elves, Frodo is eating and thinking, again, to the dismay of Pippin. As he hears Pippin off the meadow singing, we get this inner monologue. No, I could not, he said to himself. It's one thing to take my young friends walking over the Shire with me until we're hungry and weary and food and bed are sweet. To take them into exile where hunger and weariness may have no cure is quite another, even if they are willing to come. The inheritance is mine alone. I don't think I even ought to take Sam. Man, talk about tortured already. Not like on the slopes of Mount Doom by any stretch, but that's a ways away. But here we see a couple things. One, we see Hobbit nature again. Frodo is determined to go and make order out of things, echoing the prologue again, well-ordered countryside. Frodo is going on his adventure too, and I know this probably isn't the traditional interpretation of it, but he's going to fulfill his nature of a wanderer settling down, taking the chaos of a wild world and bringing to bear his will on it. Secondly, we see Frodo taking responsibility, and not even for his own actions. He's taking responsibility for the actions of his uncle Bilbo. Now, there's an argument to be made that this whole inner monologue is selfish, or he's just making himself to be the martyr, by not wanting any help or something like that. But even though Frodo is taking responsibility, he recognizes he's not at fault. It's his inheritance, but he's doing what just needs to be done. I see this echoed in the professor's life by him, serving World War I, seeing Christopher off to serve in World War II. They obviously were not responsible for the wars breaking out, but they saw the apparent danger and they did what they felt had to be done. Frodo even had the conversation with Gandalf in chapter 2, saying he wished this hadn't fallen to him, and Gandalf's response, so do I. And so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. Side note, I'm willing to bet that's the most underlined line in the book, at least on my Kindle. But here we have Frodo deciding what to do with his time. He's taking responsibility and fulfilling his nature. Elves, sir, are next. Here, I want to lightly address the difference between the tra-la-la-lally elves we see in The Hobbit and the elves we see in The Lord of the Rings. I feel like there's a general feeling that the elves in The Lord of the Rings are quite serious. They're all, brooding Mr. Smith, Mr. Anderson, played by Hugo Weaving, or the serious, scowling, elf-eyed, shield-riding Legolas. And then there are the elves of The Hobbit, tra-la-la-lally down in the valley. Here's the thing, they're the same elves. With the extensive revision Tolkien made to Riddles in the Dark, you don't think he would have taken out the phrase, kind is Christmas, when referring to Elrond in The Hobbit? Maybe. But he didn't. It's because they're the same. When Sam tells the elves in Gildor's party, leave him, I never mean to. I'm going with him. And if he climbs to the moon, and if any of those Black Riders try to stop him, they have Sam Gamgee to reckon with. What do the elves do? They laugh. I can't imagine it's derisive either. Nothing about the elves up to this point indicates it would be derisive. They are simply happy and joyous hearing Sam's devotion to his master. Even better, these particular elves are of the house of Finrod, as Gilder stated earlier. One of the many things Finrod is known for is being the first elf to meet the Edain, or the men in the Silmarillion. This is his first encounter. Lord Felgen, Finrod, watched them, and love for them stirred in his heart, but he remained hidden in the trees until they had all fallen asleep. Then he went among the sleeping people and sat beside their dying fire where none kept watch. And he took up a rude harp which Beor laid aside, And he played music upon it, such as the ears of men had not heard, for they had as yet no teachers in the arts, save only the dark elves in the wild lands. Now, I know people like to think of this deep-thinking, brooding elf picking up a harp and singing slow, sad, sonorous song. Maybe even the lay of Luthien, even though Baron wasn't around yet, whatever. But as sweet a story as this is, it's kind of funny and a little weird. He waits until they're asleep. Okay, maybe he didn't want to scare them, I guess. Then while they're asleep, he picks up a harp, starts playing music, and he woke them up. Like, rude. I like to think of this as the first practical joke in Middle-earth. And these elves the hobbits just met were from the same house. Plus, even though Legolas isn't a Noldor, we'll see him joking and having a good time with the rest of the company too. All that to say, elves are fun. And lastly, we have to talk at least briefly about what else? The song, the poem, right? Ho, 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 to the battle I go, to heal my heart and drown my woe. Rain may fall and wind may blow, and many miles be still to go, but under a tall tree I will lie and let the clouds go sailing by. This is, of course, again, in Hobbit meter, iambic tetrameter. It isn't kind of as perfect as the first line tells you, but the whole song is extremely Hobbit-like. They're going to right to the bottle of beer to heal what ails them. They have miles still to go, but they'll just, we'll take a quick rest now. And now I'm pretty garbage at dissecting Tolkien's poetry, though I am working on that, but I also don't have the time in these videos to really do it proper justice. What I suggest is check the description below, linked the specific episode Corey talks about the song with at least an approximate timestamp, so you can get his, I'll just call it much more practiced reading. I just want to acknowledge that this is about as sad as any Hobbit song seems to get. Quick, get me some beer, I'm sad. Oh man, slightly bad weather? No point in trudging through, time to take a rest. It's fun. It ends on a generally high note. It talks about walking and talks about drinking. Like, it's pure Hobbit. And that's pretty much the end of chapter 4 in our discussion. If you're enjoying this little walkthrough that we're doing, please like, subscribe, that helps a lot. And until next time, Auda and Tulava, they shall come again.